Thanks everyone for attending this morning, taking a look at how can we manage the color variations in Windchill and Creo. So before I start my presentation, quick slide on who TriStar is. If you haven't heard of us in the past, we are America's and North America's actually largest PTC partner. We deal with CAD, PLM, and ALM, and there's a lot of customers in your region and across the continent that we deal with. Today, what I want to talk about is, how do you manage colors or materials or surface finishes or some kind of a special part attribute that goes into the products. So traditionally, the way that people were managing this in CAD and PLM is you would create a different CAD model and a part for the different color that you want to manage. So whether it's a special grade of material that you're replacing a part in one assembly with another grade in a different assembly, or whether your sales team is offering different color variations of your products. Typically, people would create different CAD models or family tables and put these different CAD models into different assemblies. And then each assembly would represent a different bill of material that has that color component. Another way to do this would be to have like a multi-owner link to a WT part. So you would have a neutral CAD file, and then you would have the different colors linked to the same WT part. And then you would choose which color is applicable to which variation in that bill of material. There's advantages and disadvantages of that. When you want to replace a lot of components with a new color or create a new bill of material, it's a lot of picks and clicks to make sure that you're using the right CAD model. What we're going to talk about today is kind of the view stream in Windchill of a part and how you could use the view stream to define these color variations. So you only have one CAD model, one WT part, and from that you can define different variations used in different bills of material. There is another option, which is the options and variants functionality in Windchill, where you're configuring a product with different module options, different options that apply to what parts could be used in that design, and then filtering out for a specific option set what variant of that kind of overloaded bill of material you're using in your design. We're not going to get into that today. That could be used with downstream views or multi-owner approaches to do this, but we're just going to look at kind of the regular BOM side today. So what is kind of the deal with doing different CAD assemblies for different options of color? Well, first of all, when there's an ECN, you're going to be reworking a lot of different CAD files just to modify, to add another color or modify some colors used in designs. So that is pretty labor intensive because you got to manage a lot of different CAD assemblies. And in this case, you're probably gonna, do something special if you're doing a save as. So you have to make sure that all the parts are gathered properly. And if you're using family tables, that has its own level of complexity to do it. Let's say you're introducing a new color into here, you have to make sure that the new color is somehow related to the previous options and group them together. So it's a lot more file management, and potentially when there's a change, it's a lot of engineering time involved. When a new color is introduced, you might require revision and re-releasing of all of the CAD files that are related. So again, it's just rework time that is just very time consuming. Family tables are good at the part level, but once you get into the assembly level, we usually don't recommend using extensive family tables at the assembly levels. So what typically we see and we recommend is making sure that there's only one CAD model, and that just represents the geometry, form, fit, function. And then the color itself is defined at the part level or the WT part level. All of the other things like skews or variants of a part, they're typically defined in PLM, not at the CAD level. So if I look at a typical data model in Windchill, one of the things you have is the WT part, and then you have a CAD model that could represent it. Something new in recent versions of Windchill is this additional engineering material. So that's another object in Windchill that is linked to the part and linked to the CAD through the MTL file. So when you're assigning a material on the CAD side, this engineering material is referencing that MTL file. Now, when you want to have a color variation on this part, there's an attribute that we can add to specify whether it's a multicolor part or not. So things like standard hardware, screws, bolts, washers, standard hardware, brackets, that may not vary in color. So the multicolor attribute would be set to no. If it's set to yes, then we can create a downstream view of that part. And a lot of times that downstream view will be a new part number with a suffix, typically for different variations of it, like a -001, 002, 003, and so on. And that is using the view stream in Windchill. So it's the same part, might have a different part number, but it's always linked to the source, which is this neutral view 1, 2, 3, 4 in this case. So if the form, fit, and function changes and it needs to be revised, then that is representing these color variations that then can be changed and renumbered or revised as well. Typically, the specs, like the documentation on the color spec or the surface finish spec, material spec, are going to be tied to the color variation version, not on the original version. And a lot of times, to control the visual, like the graphics in Creo view, when the color is changed with an attribute value, Windchill can be customized to display or publish that new visualization. So it doesn't happen by default. We have to do a little bit of tricks on the back end, but based on the things like RGB values or whatever color material property you're using, that could be published into the new file. So typically, what is a view stream? So when we look at the typical out-of-the-box view stream in Windchill, you have for parts something called the engineering, manufacturing, and service view. And a lot of times people don't really configure the service from the manufacturing. They may do it from the design or engineering side. And typically, when you create a WT part, that WT part creates that Windchill part or the bill of material itself. And you can put part-specific information on the WT part and not on the CAD model itself. Because sometimes if I'm changing the finish of a part, it might not change the geometry in CAD at all. So I don't need to involve CAD, open the part or assembly, and update a drawing with that information. I can do it directly on the WT part. But with that part in different views, I can specify manufacturing only information on one view of that part and design information in a different view of that part. Now, when we're dealing with colors, we typically add another view in that view stream. So we have the engineering view. We kind of use that as just an engineering or a color version of a part. The view upstream is usually called either the design or neutral view of that part. So if I have a CAD model and I check in that CAD model, it automatically creates a part at a certain view. You define as a preference which view it will create. So it can create either the neutral view or the E-BOM, engineering BOM, or the color BOM view. So when there's a part that's created in your bill of material that has no color variation, that can just remain at the design view. You can then use the design view and use that part if there's like a color view of that component, or you can just directly use the engineering view. Now, when there's a part, when it has a color variation, you can, first of all, create a neutral view and then create a new part number, which is like the 001, 002, and have that in that color or E-BOM view. Now, when you are already using existing parts, there's also a feature in Windchill called reassign view. So even if you do assign it at a different level, you can always push it back to another view when needed. And when there's a new variant, you can just create another part number. But the CAD model from the red variant or the blue variant is always going to be that neutral CAD model. So if there's a drawing that's related to the model, it doesn't have any color information on it. it only has the color information at the part level. So when you deal with change management, it's a lot easier to kind of work with this WT part structure than it is kind of going back to the CAD structure. And when you're pushing this into ERP systems, the WT part structure is the structure that you're going to be editing and finalizing to release to ERP. So the view network is defined in Windchill. So a Windchill administrator would kind of define the names of these views, and these could be anything that you wish, and as many levels down as you wish. So there's always going to be an upstream and a downstream. So the upstream is kind of usually the design or neutral view, and then it goes through the engineering or the color variation view, and then manufacturing itself might have different bills of material that are used in different plants. So if your ERP system has different plants or different manufacturing locations that you're creating this part or bill of material for, you can specify that in Windchill on the WT part using the view network. So as an example, I have a simple assembly. It's a drawer. It has the front panel, a handle, and the components like the brackets, the hinges, the back plate that support its function. Now, sales is offering these two components in different colors. Everything else is kind of whatever material, whatever color it's designed in. So in my part numbering scheme, the color neutral part is just going to be the 295X3359. There's 4 color options that we're going to offer. There's the black version, red, blue, and lavender. And each has a different number based on the option that we're offering. So when I look at a WT part structure, I have in Windchill potentially a sales order number, and that sales order is going to be its own WT part. All of the information related to the sales order, so this assembly, documentation, other modules or replacements or alternate modules that I'm offering, could be linked to that sales order. My main assembly is going to be represented by just the part number and 2 attributes. Is it a multicolor part? And what color is it? So the drawer assembly, the panel drawer, which includes the support handle, has different color variations and different part numbers. Now the handle in this case, I'm choosing it to be also the same color, but it could be a standard color that varies only within certain panels. But in my example, I'm also going to make it the same color as the front kind of drawer unit. So that's the black version. Now, when I look at, what are the different part options in here, the ones highlighted in the red are kind of the ones that vary with a color. The other ones don't. And if I have a blue number, I have just different part numbers. If I have a red, I have a different part number, and a lavender, also a different part number. So if I look at this in Windchill, I'll pull up my design. This is the top level assembly. That's the neutral format. Now, if I look at my different views here with different columns, I can see that these parts here are identified as multicolored options, and also this one here. The other ones are not, so they stay the same. So, for example, if I have different variations of this assembly at different colors, when I go to the equivalence network, I can see that there are 3 downstream parts that are related to this assembly that are those different colors. So if I open up the 001 and look at its structure, here on the parts that are different colors, these ones are the -001. And right now, they're in the engineering view of my model. If I go back to the details on this part, I can always see what are the upstream parts that this part was derived from. So there's that 3359. There's 2 different versions of it, but that's the latest here. And if I go to the structure page and I look at what's related to those parts, I can see that there's a CAD assembly, some CAD parts that are related to this part. Now I'm going to open up another page here, and I'll grab the source assembly, which was the 3359. And I'm also going to take a look at what's related to it. So on the source assembly, I have exactly the same CAD file, let's say on the handle, that I do on the 001 CAD part rather, which is the black version. So there's only one CAD file that's linked to these different versions. So on the original 3359, I have the same assembly and the same parts that are linked to those components. So if this CAD part changes, well, not this one, but let's say this one, or the handle, in its geometry, it's going to update all of the color variation part numbers that is used in, other than potentially the color visual on that part. I don't have the color variations working on the visual on this server, so I won't be able to show that it's a different color actually, but that's something you would enable to have it visually shown. So now the question is, what if I want to create another variation of a color? So here on the source assembly, I have those 3 variations so far, the 01, 02, and 03. So let's create a 04. So traditionally, to create a 04, I would have to do something like a save as on that assembly, add another component, replace those parts at the CAD level. That's a lot of work. I can do it in the BOM transformer. So here I have the BOM transformer. I'm just going to make sure that I'm looking at the right filter, which is the design and engineering filter. In this case, the engineering filter. Right now, these parts are designated as multicolor. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select those parts that could be multicolor, and I'm going to right click and create a new part number for that. So on my window here that comes up, I'm going to create these in the engineering view. I'm going to say that this is a 004 version. Right. Notice all of these part numbers are going to just have a 004 suffix. I'm going to say that this is a lavender color option, which fills out my property value. And to create that new 004 bill of material, I'm just going to create OK, or select OK. So on the right side here, it's asking what bill of material do you want to display. So I'm going to display the bill of material of that lower unit assembly. So now it's showing me the 004 version of that bill of material that I created. So I can see the handle, the panel, drawer, and this top level assembly as a 004. So now on my attributes on the original assembly, I can see now there's 4 variations of that top level assembly that are different color variations. And on the attributes on the downstream variation, I can always get back to the top level assembly in the view network that this was derived from. So to the 3359 assembly. So now if I go back into Windchill, I refresh my page on the 3359. Right now I have another downstream equivalent part linked to it. So if I click on it and look at its structure, this is the lavender version. So I have the color, and if I look at what's related to it, it copies over, well, at least it should have copied over, the CAD models. I'm not sure why I didn't do that. There, I might have missed an option in that transformer, but it should have, or it should have come across with the CAD models linked to each of these items, these new items, 04 items in my structure. Every other part is still the same, and this is a lot quicker to create these color variations using the view stream network than it is just kind of doing it in CAD one by one, or modifying the WT part structure and then going into CAD to fix it. So I can always open up that source CAD model and modify and propagate the changes to all of these color variations. So in my change management, if something happens on this 3359 assembly, let's say I add a new change notice to grab all of those color variations. Let's say there's a revision to it. I'm going to start a new change notice here. Grab what's affected. So once I grab that top level assembly, I can go into the collector. So that top level assembly has the CAD, and I can also grab through the view network all the downstream objects. So there is an option here. I'm not sure whether we have it configured properly to get it. That's the other parts. Yeah, it's probably not working properly on my end, but I want to make sure I have the right filter. So I want to engineering. Yeah, so I really don't need all these other parts. So when I selected that part and I said, collect all the downstream equivalent objects, it grabbed the 001, 2, 3, and 4 because it saw that they're linked to this top level view in my view network and the associations through the BOM transformer that I created. So in this case, if I'm modifying something on this assembly, I know which parts have been affected. And of course, I can add another view in here that displays the color information. In my case, I don't have that in my default view. But so change management allows me to, kind of take the related information and replace colors quite quickly in the bill of material. So that was the topic that I wanted to show you today. I want to see if anybody has any questions.
You raise our hand, shout out, chat.
If anyone has a question, just go ahead and ask. Thanks.
Okay, can you guys hear me? Oh.
Yeah,
Yes.
I can hear you.
Okay, so a couple of questions, but let me just do one for now. For any non-color variant, does that mean we need to create an engineering view for consistency purposes, I guess for integration with ERP? From like a process perspective, saying only engineering views get sent to ERP? Because in this case over here, you have some engineering views and you have some design views mixed. how does it work in terms of like consistency and sending information to ERP, and this stuff goes to ERP, this stuff doesn't go to ERP, this stuff gets released, this stuff doesn't get released?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, like, if I go into the, let's say the original assembly, this one here has the parts that are not varying in color in the design view. Sorry, in the engineering view. And the parts that are varying in color, they're kind of, in this case, in the design view. So when you're pushing this bill of material into ERP, it's going to determine what filter you're pushing. So Windchill has this filter view. So right now I'm looking at show me the latest, show me the engineering. I can also say show me the latest, but also show me design. So let me do both. So I can do both of them at the same time. So right, it'll show me whatever's in one view, whatever's in another view. So whatever filter you have set, that's what is going to be used for your ERP push. So in the connectors or whatever middleware that you need to communicate sending information to ERP is going to have this filter information as well.
So when you create the WT part, though, for instance, the pivot or the rivet, all those are already in the engineering view. So were those WT parts initially created in the engineering view?
In this case, they were. Yes.
And so were they created from a CAD check-in associate? Because over here, then.
Typically, yes.
So then if I checked in this assembly for the first time with a CAD associate, some of them are getting auto created in the engineering view, and some of them are getting auto created in the design view.
So there's several ways to do it, but yes. So there's a preference on the auto associate that tells the system when you're checking in a part, which view to use. And if you have multiple views that are not controlled by one preference only, then in your workspace, when you create a part and then auto associate, you can select what view you want to create of that WT part.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
And there's also other things you can set up in Windchill. For example, if you have some attributes on the parts, like we use this multicolor attribute, and when you create a new part, we set it to either yes or no. And based on the value of that attribute, you can also tell Windchill to create a part of a certain view. So if I say yes, it's always going to create a WT part on the design view. If it sees that the value is set to no, it's always going to create it at a certain view that you select. Right? If I go into the system here and I create a new part, whether it's by auto associate or not, you have to fill out the multicolor attribute.
And is a preference to create based on that attribute, which view, or is that some other mechanism?
That's a very good question. I don't know if there's a preference for that. I think it's some kind of a listener on the server that we would use.
Okay.
Anybody else have questions? Before I turn it over to anybody else, I just wanted to mention that if you are a CAD Windchill admin, we do have these monthly not lunch and learns, these monthly roundtables. So just watch our website. The next one is not scheduled, but it's summertime, but we do monthly. It's Thursday, generally Thursday at 11 a.m. Central Time. So just, you can reach out to me or anybody in this group that goes to these meetings and just ask. Thanks.
So I did have a question. So
Yes.
the issue with the propagation of the CAD links, right? So you did it. You did a downstream conversion to create essentially the different colors, but it didn't carry over the CAD relationship to the new parts.
Yeah, in my case, it didn't. I don't know why. I've tried this on the other variations, like the 01, 02, 03, and they did carry over the CAD models. So I'm not sure why in this case it didn't.
I'm curious to see the related objects of the CAD. Just trying to look at the link types that are created, just trying to understand that.
Yeah, some of them have it, some of them don't. Not sure why.
If we could just look at that assembly, just look at the details of that assembly. And from the CAD assembly. Yeah, let's view its information. It's a content link.
Yeah, I'm not sure how they did this.
Yeah, because
I would have to ask the person who created this one why they did that.
Yeah, but that would be a problem, right? Because I can't drive changes from CAD to the other views. I got to have that owner link, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the way that this should work is the CAD is going to be propagated to that part. Now, it depends because sometimes a multi-owner link needs to be created because this CAD model can only be tied to one WT part as an owner. And if it's tied to other WT parts, they can only be content link, like in this case. So sometimes we'll turn on the multi-owner option. So this part can be owner of multiple parts. So if it changes, all those parts change.
What's the criteria for turning that on versus not turning it on?
I think it depends on what the part or what the CAD model drives. If it's a standard component, it's only going to be linked to one part number. But if I want to push attributes from the CAD model into the WT part, then I want to make sure that every WT part is applicable to those CAD attributes. Because sometimes people put CAD attributes into the CAD file that really cannot drive multiple parts because they're specific to that CAD file. So that's why we always recommend don't put part related attributes into the CAD model, like a material, for example. And that's where PTC is kind of going, creating that material object. So you're assigning it to the WT part level, and then the CAD is inheriting that material instead of the other way around, which is what happens today.
Okay, I mean, so I mean, the way that what you showed, like I would, if I want to maintain that owner relationship between the different color variants, it almost sounds like I'd have to use multiple owner links for it to be able to drive that information back and forth between the single CAD to all the multiple parts. Is that a true statement?
It depends on what you put on your CAD model. If it's driving some type of a part attribute from the CAD that's not standard, just like a description number, then you can only use content links to the CAD instead of owner links.
But then that breaks the availability for publishing to, show the geometry on the thumbnail and the visualization, right?
I think we have to do some tweaks to enable that. It's not out of the box, that's for sure.
Okay.
Yep. But ultimately, any color variation you bring up, you also need to see the geometry, not just the color attribute.
Agreed. Yeah, agreed.
For sure.
Okay, that was my question. Thank you.
Okay, I've got another question. If we have other options or variants tied into color, would it be safe to say to use color within those other mechanisms? So if we're already using options and variants for one specific purpose, to then use color as part of that as well. This way we're not stacking so many different mechanisms for options and variants on top of each other.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't use two approaches at the same time. So you'd have to make a decision. Do you continue using color with options and variants or not?
Because we have some product lines that are purely color variants, and then we have some product lines that are options and variants in addition with color variants. And so just from a setup perspective, do we say, well, it depends on the product line and which situation that we go with which approach, and that can theoretically be confusing from a process perspective, and I'm sure from a user perspective as well.
Sure. Yeah, I think we'd have to work with the specific use cases to see what makes sense, because you definitely wouldn't want to use two approaches at the same time. It would be really confusing.
Right. And I have a feeling, one quick question, because I have a feeling I know what you're going to say, but in the case over here where you have a shelving unit, or even that initial slide that showed different colors for a mouse, if there was a label on the bottom of that mouse that indicated that specific SKU for that specific color variant, how would that change what you were doing, where each assembly has its own unique label?
So the label part number would be different.
Correct. Right. The contents of the
'cause it's a-
label would be different
right,
because it's a different SKU. Right. Yeah.
So you could probably apply the same technique to different labels. So, instead of having a multicolor attribute, you could have some kind of attribute that says is it a custom label or not, or something similar to that? Is it varying in some way due to finish or some other application on the surface? And you could do the same transformation. The only tricky part is the visual. Like, do you have the visuals of the label in your visualization or not?
Right. So yeah, I mean, and then it comes down to from a CAD perspective, you're then going to have a generic CAD, label instead of having, specific part numbers. Right. So, you on one end, you try to push the
Right.
engineers to have their CAD match the BOM as close as possible for an easy association from CAD to the EBOM. But then you start having all these exceptions. Well, for color variants, we're gonna, and then for labels, and then, I agree. I think, labels will probably be another exception to the rule, but the more exceptions you have, the make life easier, the more confusing it gets, which makes life harder. So,
Sure.
Okay, we probably have 3 more minutes, so we can quit at 12:55. Does anybody else have a quick question?
I was just going to add that if there's a documentation that shows how to generate the visualizations correctly, if that can be shared afterwards, like how to set up color generation based on this approach. So the blue attribute becomes blue and the red attribute becomes red.
Bogdan, did you want
Sure. Yeah.
to,
I'll
did you want to get that off to him? Because, I mean, I've got everybody's email, but I don't know if everybody wants that information.
yeah, I think I'll have to look for it. The 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 services folks who set this up for our customers, they probably have documentation on this, so I'll have to look for it.
Okay, thanks.
Since we have a minute, from an ECN perspective, because we have these design views and engineering views, where do you find the distinction between, like, is the design view included in any ECN or just the engineering views?
Well, it depends on the type of ECN, right? If you're flagging the whole family, then you want to include the upstream views as much as you can. So it would always go back to the design view. But it depends on the change. What are you trying to do?
Okay, so even though the design view is in the ECN, what gets pushed to ERP is based on whatever rules are with it, in the integration side of it. So then just the engineering view information would get pushed.
Yeah, it's always based on those filters.
Yeah.
So even though the design view is on there, because you're making a change to the top product, whatever attribute, whatever standard component you're adding it, that should appear in all of those other variations, then you want to push the downstream view to the ERP system, not the upstream view. So like all the engineering views would be passed, and some parts could still be in design, but the final view that you're passing would always be the, let's say, the engineering, or most of the cases it probably would be the manufacturing version that's driven off of those engineering views.
Okay, I think we should wrap it up. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Bogdan. Thanks to TriStar. And like I mentioned, our next Lunch and Learn is not till September. We'll take August off. A lot of people are vacationing and it's hard to get speakers. So yeah, September 17th, Bart Bretschka is going to be speaking. I think we're still working on the topic, but we've got time. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.